All right, let's have a conversation. This was probably my most demanded conversation yet to have. We're going to be continuing this. I'm going to be calling this "Them's Fighting Words" because we're going to have martial artists and myself talking about our beloved sport, combat, fighting, all the good stuff. You guys have been asking for a long time for Dan the Wolfman, and here he is. Dan, man, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate that, and thank you for accommodating me the other day. I couldn't talk, so I appreciate you giving me some leeway with that.
No problem. Just kind of works out with some crazy work scheduling type stuff that's been going on. So thank you for having me. Welcome everybody. And yeah, I get a bag on Wing Chun now or what?
Yeah, you can. So how I found you was somebody, I can't remember the guy, and I gave him credit in the last video, but somebody said, have you ever seen Dan the Wolfman? So I'm like, no. And I started to be, I'm very closed-minded. And if you can't tell in my videos. So over the years, I'm like, all right, I'll get a little bit more open-minded. So I'm like, all right, I'll check this guy out. Looked at your stuff, and I came across the Sistema Punch video. And two things that really, really made me instantly like your stuff is, well, number one, it was your explanation of the Sistema Punch, and then the which I have no experience in, but when I watched you, I 100% knew you knew exactly what you were talking about. And that punch, I could feel it with just, it was like a sack of fucking bricks going into a guy. But what really killed me is in that same video, if anybody watches, it's your face lights up when you look at the guy and you're like, do you want to take a real one? One here, one there? And I'm like, this guy loves to fight. And you could just, that was the selling point to me was I'm like, man, there's so many people online who are all talkers, and I'm looking at your stuff, and you've put your money where your mouth is. And you are, what I like about you, and I may be wrong, is, yeah, you got some humility in you, but you don't either. You know your shit. And I was like, man, all right, I started following you, and I like what you're doing. So number one, tell everybody
I'm at the point where I don't put up with like the keyboard trolls. I never really did, but it's like, wait, you're starting to judge me and say something that can't work. Where are you coming from? Like, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea how to fight. You have no background. You have no. You did what, 2 months of something? Like, these guys have no. It's always the guys with the lowest level that say that can't work. This can't work. That's not right. This isn't right. That are keyboard warriors. And back in our day, we would just like smack someone the F up if that's how they acted to us, so disrespectful and rude in person, and that's why society around the world has gone downhill, and we're the shitbox that we are now. But
give everybody a background, because you've got an incredible background. I mean, tell us who the hell you are.
Well, I'm becoming an old guy now. I'm 45, and I started martial arts when I was 9. So I started in Taekwondo. I did that whole thing for a good long time, but I always was like reading books and anything I could get my hands on. This is like kind of pre-internet for the most part.
Yeah.
So, I studied everything that I could. I started like all the Bruce Lee books and Taoji Kundo, and I started like, I think at 16, I went 16, 17, the first time I got punched by like a real man hard in the face. I went to this kickboxing school that was like a former, I think, a PKA champion above the belt stuff. But I mean, there were real kickboxers there. And this guy, like, it wasn't tag. He hit me for friggin' real. And then I kind of kept going on and on. I got my black belt. It did take me a long time, I think from 9 to like 15, 16. But I was his first black belt, so it wasn't totally McDojo. And at the end of class, I always had him throwing elbows, knees, spinning back fists, stuff like that. Which before I got in a 2-on-1 stick attack, spinning back fist was the first thing I did to the guy that was behind me, I guess, according to the witness that did nothing to jump in and help me. But anyway, I went off to college and I started doing more and more. I did like a 1-credit judo class, an aikido class. I TA'd the taekwondo class. Occasionally different summers, I would work with the wrestling team. During the summers, they would allow me to, but not during like the school year because I needed bodies, right? And grapple people after taekwondo class, like, hey, come on, let's do some of this jiu-jitsu stuff, because I first saw the UFC And then I went, no, I'm going to do this someday. There's that big wrestler, Dan Severn. I don't know where Coldwater, Michigan is, but I'm going to find him. I'm going to convince him to train me. And I did. It took me a year. Luckily, someone had put a joke in this big black book of martial arts in the back called The Beast Den, like a play off the Lion's Den. And I called him up. And so I started training with Dan. I left college, university to the other side of the state for the one jiu-jitsu blue belt. I was going to the JKD schools at the time and like training like a madman, like jiu-jitsu here and JKD at night, or Dan Severn's here, and then jiu-jitsu earlier in the day, and the JKD schools like JKD class, a Muay Thai Savate class, and like a Shudo, catch wrestling, Shudo style Japanese class, or jiu-jitsu, you know. So I was always doing, I kind of dabbled out and started doing everything, and I basically have done everything ever since.
And you actually put it into context. You fought professionally.
Yeah, I did fight professionally. I won 3 fights by first round submission. I lost 3 fights to 3 of the most experienced fighters in the world, either at the time I fought them or now. If you look up the top 10 list, I think they're 3 of the top 6 in most professional fights. I mean, like 300 something plus fights. That was early days. And I mean, that was when I was a white to blue belt level in jiu-jitsu. So to kind of wrap it up, I've always done everything. I've been open-minded. I would say that I got a black belt in Taekwondo. I got a black belt in Daido Juko, which is like hardcore Kyokushin karate, judo, MMA, but street-minded, fast-paced 3-minute fights. I got a black belt in Hayastan grappling system under Judo Jean LaBelle, may he rest in peace.
Wow.
My instructor, Ngokor Shavichian. And then my 4th in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I'm like one of like 4 or 5 guys in the world to have both a Gokar LaBelle black belt and a BJJ black belt. But I would consider myself a subject matter expert on catch wrestling, on combatives, and I dabble with all the Systema and systemic concepts, but I got to make it clear I'm not a licensed Systema certified teacher. The things I do, though, seem to make Vladimir happy, Vladimir Vasiliev, and I hope it stays that way, because I don't claim I teach Systema, but I teach some systemic concepts. That video you first saw was actually at the end of my combative retreat jiu-jitsu seminar I did on a Saturday, and then a Sunday I did a no-gi grappling catch wrestling type seminar that a Army Ranger officer brought me in to teach, who's now joined the federal government in another capacity, but he brought me in to teach him basically. and some of his guys.
Can we basically sum this up by saying you're an expert in martial arts and combatives and know what you're talking about? I mean, that's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just because I was more dedicated than everybody else. So like call it OCD or whatever, like everybody else just dabbles, and I literally would move to the other side of the state. I moved from one state to another to join Tito's team because he said, hey, come out and join my team. Like I always moved to train with the best guys. I've spent about 1.5 years off and on in Japan. I've visited Korea. I've visited Thailand. I've done all that. I've taught in other countries. So like some of these haters always online are like the white belt beginner, blue belt, early beginning guy, like, oh, my martial art's the best. You could never hit someone for real that way, or you could never pull off that Aikido or Wing Chun technique, the stuff I incorporate from those styles. But reality is, it's like, no, I'm not a beginner. I've done this my entire life with full dedication, kind of like nobody really does anymore, because practically it doesn't pay the bills. I work as an armed guard.
Well, that's one of the things that impresses me the most about you is you started in a traditional background and you dedicated yourself to that, right? You mastered that, and then I've never heard you shit on another martial art. When you talk about things, I've never heard you really talk garbage about anything else. Do you think that it was important for you, because we're relatively the same age? Well, we are. I'm 47, you're 45. Mm-hmm. When we started something, we started and finished it, and we didn't have MMA when we were growing up. So you didn't have a time to dabble. I'm going to do 6 months in this, 2 months in this. You did. You dedicated your time in that. Do you think that helped you in your journey? And is it a detriment today where kids they're not going to a class and learning this for 5-6 years before they go on to something else?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, now that I've never really thought about that, but I was dedicated to Taekwondo, but I kept open-minded about other stuff. I tried to learn about it, even if I couldn't train in it by the time I was a teenager. So I was always open-minded to other stuff and trying to. The instructor knew he would leave. I would be in charge of class, and everyone would love it because we're doing knees and elbows and spinning back fist on the heavy bag. I'm trying to make it more realistic, street fight, practical, even back when I was a teenager. But it is a good background. I do always say that I think if you can find a real karate school or judo for kids, that's probably the best because of the respect and the dedication and all that. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of karate in America is dojo karate, but if you could find real karate, real Shotokan, real Kyokushin, it's really hard to find in America. But if you did, like LA or New York's a little easier, or Daido Juko, I think that or judo is kind of the way to go. And then you can get into wrestling and boxing if the person's a little more harder mentality, forward pressure mentality, like me and you have. Like, oh, like you could do wrestling and you're a little older now. You can do some boxing. When you're older, you can do Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu when you already kind of have that judo slash karate type of TMA background. I think that does help when you're a kid because it gets you the discipline and to focus on kind of one thing like you're talking about.
We oh gosh, I'm gonna you know who he is it Lachito Machado? Who's
Lyoto Machida?
Lyoto Machida. I'm sorry, thank you. He has a massive background in traditional martial arts. Do you think that because everybody had been shitting on traditional martial arts once MMA came around, do you think that traditional martial arts has any place in MMA, or are they completely separate animals and MMA is just superior?
Both. They are separate animals now. MMA has to be trained as its own separate sport instead of it used to just be boxing and wrestling, either that or Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. And still in other countries, the instructors well, we do a Muay Thai class and we do a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. So you're doing MMA. That's not MMA. Like modern Jiu-Jitsu doesn't even think about strikes. So that's not MMA, and still a lot of other countries think like Muay Thai plus Jiu-Jitsu equals MMA. That's not the case at all. MMA has evolved. It's a different thing. The striking systems I teach are a different thing. It's more movement, more shifting a greater distance than Muay Thai or even Dutch kickboxing. It's at a greater distance, more off-rhythm attacks and all. So MMA is kind of its own sport. Is karate or traditional martial arts still important? Well, not only did you have Lyoto Machida, you had Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, you had George St. Pierre was a Kyokushin black belt. So these guys had a background. Now, Lyoto even, I was his sparring partner for 3 months. He had some sumo background. Even when he fought BJ Penn, you can see some awesome throws when blowing up BJ Penn. But before Lyoto was in UFC or his fight versus Stephan Bonner pre-UFC in Brazil, you can see some of the sumo slash Shotokan Kazushi throws and stuff. And so he kind of kept to his traditional roots, but did it the right way and kept some of that, but also added on the boxing and Muay Thai and everything that he needed to add on and the wrestling that he needed to add on. So it's like, could he do that if only he did karate? Well, no, he didn't only do karate. So it's kind of, the answer is kind of both in a weird way, I would say, is that like MMA is its own thing. MMA is the superior fighting style if you're just worried about fighting, especially in a sport aspect, one-on-one. But it probably, I bet the people that become champions, a lot of them had the traditional roots. And that might be changing, but back in the day, the guys, they had the discipline to train that hard and work on their weak points. They got that discipline from karate or judo or something to that effect.
How are you viewing... Do we see that martial arts is going to become we're just going to get, I mean, there's no interest in joining a karate school, a Wing Chun school, and people are just going to be going, I'm just going to go right in MMA, and that's going to water down martial artists in, I don't know, their mentality or their ability? Because what we're seeing out here in Chicago area, you really don't get a lot of hardcore, dedicated martial artists who are in their specific art. It's just, I do MMA. And it's, do you think that devalues martial arts?
I don't know about devalues, but it is gonna kick Wing Chun and Aikido specifically, like those types of styles, in the butt. Because if you can't prove that it really works, then you can't prove that it really works. If you can't prove your stuff really works, well, I can watch this on TV and I see the similar stuff we're learning. Hopefully it's from a legitimate guy, like at least amateur level MMA fighter with a purple belt in jiu-jitsu versus just like a karate guy claiming he's teaching MMA. Hopefully it's a halfway legit guy, but like it's going to hurt the Wing Chun and Aikido. Is the karate and judo still going to be there? I think so, because of the uniform and the belts and the discipline. Like the kids will always kind of go to that versus like, I mean, maybe Kung Fu is going to make a comeback like it did in the late 70s, early 80s in New York, where like wearing a black button-up
you're on the street,
and sash was like guys, everyone Kung Fu fighting. You know, like maybe that will make a comeback because things are kind of cyclical. But for a while, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, Chicago had Count Dante, was like a legend. Yeah, I don't know that much about him other than I know that he's like this big, massive urban legend who is supposed
I've seen some of the ads, so I'm somewhat familiar.
Right.
And some of their stories, the dim mock touches of
death. And that's the crap. That's the crap that really did that did a number on arts like Wing Chun. Like my journey, I wrestled forever. And when I left, I dropped out of college, and I was working in the bar industry, and I found a guy who was doing Wing Chun. He was kind of like screwing around. We were doing some drills. I'm like, this is awesome. I couldn't find an art that I liked because I was so used to being a shorter guy, closing the distance. You live in that grappling space. I'm strong as fuck. So I'm like, I like this. This is great. You know, you get in, you don't get punched. You just wreck somebody like that. But the older I got, I didn't want to grapple anymore. Boxing was out of the question because when I did box and screw around people, they were taller than me. So they got that jab in on me like crazy. I'm like, I hate this. And karate was out of the question. I fell in love with Wing Chun because a lot of people just don't get. And some guy really did a great video on YouTube the other day that it's like a massive percent, 70+% of Kung Fu lives in grappling space. And when I saw Wing Chun, I'm like, yeah, there's strikes here. But as you know, when it comes down to legitimate street fights, you don't see people who are truly putting up their dukes and going at it. What do? We grab wrists, grab lapels, which is where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was phenomenal at. But Wing Chun lived in that space. When it comes down to what you've experienced with Aikido, with JKD, with Wing Chun, have you ever, with your background, coming from traditional, coming from really applying it, being in the street, being in the ring, did you ever see the arts like Aikido, Wing Chun, JKD, and go, yeah, there's legitimate stuff in this that works because of who you are in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to take what works from any style. Like, so I get a lot of crap because I've defended system, I've defended Aikido, I've defended Wing Chun, but I also can kind of bag on those styles too with some legitimacy because what you're talking about Wing Chun living in that grappling realm, that's also why Wing Chun is the least, no offense, that's why it's the least successful, is because it's the range of fighting that things don't stay at.
Yeah, the problem is with I'm not going to disagree with you. Because even
boxers clinch. Boxers aren't supposed to clinch. They clinch all the time, just like a street fight. We're winging haymakers. You nail someone, and then immediately it's a headlock. So the mid-range of trappingness is already crashed through. So it's the easiest range to crash through. That's kind of the same with the bullshit Kali stuff. Kali, if you get in a real stick fight, if you see Dog Brothers or Sayu Kali guys fighting full contact out in the woods, it's either outside big gorilla motion, big hits, or it's inside of the clinch range, putting the stick under the armpit or behind the neck, knee in the guy, clinch takedown. The mid-range disarm, flow, drill bullshit doesn't happen. Why? Because it is it's a time and space that is the easiest that naturally, instinctively.
We need to talk about that for half of a second. And it's always been my experience that most people, what our natural body mechanics is to kind of flinch, right? Whenever you're in that space between closing the distance, you're safe. Distance is closed, you're less safe, and you're going to wind up flinching to prevent yourself from getting hit. That's where that clinch is easily destroyed because of people's automatic body response system to be, I don't want to fuck up. So what do we do as guys? We grab, we clinch, we go right down to the ground. That's one of my biggest problems with Wing Chun is the misrepresentation for that space and why they don't teach to wind up dealing with that pressure. So I'm going to agree with you on that. I've always bitched about that with the Wing Chun guys who are out there and they're worried about striking when it's got to be transitioned into the stand-up grappling, if you will, and I talk about that.
Or at least an attached hand is my hits as I'm grabbing his collar or grabbing a single collar tie behind his head.
Right.
Like, oh, now we're kind of squishing closer. Well, use some off balancing and then maybe the throws and that kind of thing. But you could be hitting instead of thinking I must be in my proper positioning.
Thank you.
Form.
Thank you, because that's a fight.
This is just to get in. This could be a flinch response into a double leg. My high elbow rolling extra high bong sao becomes a flinch underneath something into a double leg or whatever. So, I mean, as I told one of your guys before, I don't have a long Wing Chun background. I did JKD off and on for quite a few years, but I did Wing Chun with a math professor, an Italian math professor under Amin Bostepi. And I went to one.
He's an animal. Bostepi is one of the best in the world. No question.
He had serious Greco. We did pummeling. He was ridiculously on some good vitamins. It seemed like he was a very strong fella with some ripped muscles and some fast explosiveness. If you have attributes, you can make a lot work, and maybe that's why I can make some Aikido.
So that's
like sensitivity that all the Aikido guys should have, and they lack.
So I want to talk about that.
Sensitivity to make it work.
We're built the same. You're a Mack truck. How tall are you?
I'm just shy of 5'11". I am about 240 pounds.
You're a big damn dude. If you go back to the tradition, I've always said this. I have said that I think one of the lies of Wing Chun is because you'll have even Bostepi's teacher, Keith Kernspet, learned under Lung Ting, and Lung Ting has a famous video. I don't think you should do any weightlifting for Wing Chun. I always said that's a way to dumb down their students, so the teacher always says at the top. Now, you're built, you're big, you're strong. Wait a minute. What does that make you a better fighter if you've got muscle and you've got strength and you still learn JKD and Sistema and Aikido? I don't understand that. Why would you do that?
It's almost like attributes are helpful. Strength, speed, endurance. Yeah, I mean, we need to work on our endurance more as me and you get older, but I'm getting it back a little bit because I'm coming back off of knee surgery. I'm actually teaching at a Krav Maga school.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, obviously having attributes, but attributes aren't just strength and speed, which everyone thinks of when they're young, but it's also sensitivity and rooting and balance and having structure in your spine and knowing where to be. So like as your speed diminishes as you age, which is always going to, we can keep the strength, but the speed, the reaction speed's going to diminish. I was always fast. So I was able to make up a reach difference because realize I was always sparring light heavyweight and heavyweight UFC champions. So we're talking the guys that are 6'1", 6'2" to 6'8". I mean, I was sparring Tim Sylvia, was 6'8". So I always had that reach disadvantage.
Jeez.
So I have to learn how to blitz in, and my striking looks kind of weird to blitz in, get in and out to get past like the jab and the front kicks that could keep me at a distance. Someone with a real shotgun jab hurts people like me and you a lot because it's hard to get in on that. Those are like the hardest people to deal with. So I got to learn how to like kick them in the calf and blitz in with a 3-hit combo and get back out before their punches get me. Or do tricks like when I was sparring Fabricio Verdum, UFC heavyweight champ 6'4", I would switch to southpaw and I realized he always leaned back, so I couldn't hit him. He would use his height to lean back. I would step on his foot like I do in the movie Real Steel as a robot. I would step on his foot and triple jab him so the second and third ones would hit him. The first one would miss, he'd lean back, but by stepping on his foot, he could only lean back so far, and I would frustrate him. You know, I'm not saying he never got his licks in on me. You can see in a video, I'm beat up pretty good. But you learn tricks, and wisdom is something you gain from training and from fighting. And so attributes always help, but also like technique helps as you age to make up for your waning attributes. But when you're young, you better develop the attributes, because if you don't, you're just then an old man claiming all this stuff works, and you can't really make anything work.
That's where we're at with YouTube, is everybody's got a theory. Everybody's out there talking theory, and there's no real training or application, and everybody wants proof now too. One of the big, I just did a video today.
I know. I was watching half of it when you texted you. I was watching it, but I'm gonna fight you on that because I think sparring is essential.
Well, there's my question: is to define it, right? So the biggest problem I have is because I started looking over the stuff I put up over the years, and I've just never put on gloves, headgear, and whatnot. But we've sparred, and I proved that. I put stuff up today showing that I did. Why is it that the martial arts community, because you have extensive experience in the traditional martial arts community too, Why are they saying there's two sides to this, right? Number one, you get the MMA guys are like, or the MMA fanboy wannabes are like, well, show us your stuff in sparring, right? Because your martial art is not legitimate unless you can make it work in sparring. Then you get the traditional guys who will see like Anderson Silva or Tony Ferguson do a Pak sound. Oh my God, see, Wing Chun does work. So with both camps, because both camps are fucked up, how do you, because you're in the middle. You are one of the few guys who is legitimately right. You could talk on both sides. How do you shut both sides up?
I think the sparring, it's an easy fallback, but there's a lot of truth to it. If I can't see you do it, how do you know you can do it? If you can't prove it with some sparring footage, how can you prove that you actually know how to fight?
Well, define the sparring first. Is it that's like, because if you saw content I put up, would it be considered sparring where I'm doing no glove light exchanges with people? Is that still sparring, or do I have to glove up and do 30% of my ability?
I have a Systema versus MMA. I have two videos. The first one is a lot of bare knuckle. I like to train people when I have the freedom to do so wherever I'm teaching. I like to train them bare knuckle and just learn control to roll off hits and not be scared psychologically of the bare fist.
There you go.
So I do, if there's enough contact, I do consider that sparring. If it becomes like, he's pulling a foot away, then I don't consider that sparring.
Right.
I do believe you have to spar occasionally hard. I sparred too hard back in the day. I was at Militich's camp sparring 6'8" Tim Sylvia. That wasn't good for my brain. I shouldn't have been doing it. Rampage just hit me pretty damn hard. Like, some of that was too hard. We sparred too hard back in the day. But on the other side of it, like, if you can't prove me you're sparring, how can you claim this is where I get in trouble, because if you can't prove you know how to fight one-on-one in all ranges of combat, how do you think, why am I going to believe you could fight multiple attackers or weapons?
See, I think you're the wrong guy to ask this question, because, again, the definition of what sparring seems to be online is guys will glove up, shin pads, headgear, boxing gloves, and they'll go at like this grandmother energy. It doesn't sound like that's what you do. It sounds like you're the spectrum. So
no,
you might be the wrong guy to ask
this. No, I was going too hard back in the day. But there's like, okay, I'm going to throw a YouTuber a bone here, Jeff Chan. He's one of the guys I respect on YouTube. He just got his brown belt with BJJ. I actually dogged one of his grappling videos he did a couple years ago when he was a purple belt, because I said, nah, this isn't so good. Your striking's pretty good. Your grappling's not so good. No, his grappling's gotten up to where it should be. His striking, his sparring videos are very good, and people love him, probably because he has better presentation and isn't so rough. So I had all these sparring videos around the world nowadays that didn't get any of the views. I didn't edit it good and commentate over it and stuff. I've tried to do a few of those, but he's legitimately sparring, and he has some where guys start going ham on him and it starts going too hard, but he actually says that when it's going too hard, or I caught him and he came back firing a shot. But a lot of his stuff is at like the 80%, 85%, like good work level, like pros should be doing. So a lot of his sparring videos, I would say, look at Jeff Chan for like, what is good sparring? And then there's some where he's going too hard. I'm like, why is he going so hard? And some where like he's going against a big New York bouncer and the guy starts swinging haymakers at him, which sometimes gets a little too hard. But I mean, the guy takes it and he's skilled. He relies a little too much on speed with his head movement to get out of the way. I'm like, oh, you're going to lose that in 10 years. You're not always going to have that attribute to look so cool on YouTube with, that speed attribute, which is why kind of like he gets a lot of, anyone that can be like Asian looking at Bruce Lee, like everyone thinks like, oh, you're the magic. Yeah, but wait till you're 40, kid. But I'm not dogging
Shit
on
hurts,
I'm just
man.
saying, when you rely on speed, we saw that with Roy Jones Jr. We saw that a little bit with Mayweather. When you rely on speed, that is the first kind of attribute to go. I think I still have pretty good speed. I'm starting to move pretty good again. But anyway, sparring I do think is important. And if you can't show it, and I get these people hating me. Now, I sparred probably 600, 700, 800.
I don't understand that. I don't understand how anybody could hate you, because, again, and I'm not kissing your ass on this one, but you've done far more in the competitive world of fighting than I have. I was a wrestler. I did 3 smokers for boxing. That's it. That being said, my stuff was either in the bars or on the street as a cop, right? So if you're in, how the fuck can anybody give you hate when you legitimately fought professionally? I don't understand that at all.
because I didn't. Then it was never. I mean, the bars always move. I didn't fight enough, which is true. I should have fought more. I only had 6 like MMA fights.
That's
2
6 more than
Eco
90% of the
fights.
people online.
Yeah, it is. So they hate me, and now I made this video, luckily, in my late 30s, and I have lupus. So I was like, I'm going downhill. I need to film some of my sparring, and I always ask permission, and I did. But I have a video for 30 of the top guys, and it's like they weren't necessarily the best. Like I didn't film when I was a little younger with Yodo and it was Tim Sylvia and Ben Rothwell and Verdum. I didn't like. I felt intimidated to ask, and I kind of just didn't. Then I wish I would have, but at least I got this. And it's like, man, why are you claiming the stuff I teach for self-defense doesn't work when I can show you? I can fight sparring. I can fight in the clinch. I can fight with takedowns. I can fight on the ground. I can like legitimately prove it. And I still got some stuff today on BJJ Fanatics forum. People are like, "Oh, you sound like the self-defense guru. I never lost a street fight." I'm like, "Well, I did never lose a street fight. I lost 3 MMA fights versus the best guys in the world, but I've never lost a street fight. I guess I had 2 sort of draws. If you consider a 2-on-1, they had a stick, and I eventually squared up, and we both drove away as the cop sirens started coming. I drove to the hospital bleeding my head. I took one out with a side kick to the chest. I mean, I consider that a win, but if you want to call that a draw, sure. But I don't think I ever lost a street fight since I was an early kid. I used to ground and pound people before, and I had no wrestling training, but I certainly knew how to ground and pound, get to mount and pound face.
I got to ask, because there's a reality of it, because you are somebody that can answer this. We know that legitimate street fighting is violence, and it's horrible. Is there, when I saw the video of you explaining the system of punch and your eyes lit up when, you know, they're like, "Do you want to feel a real one?" It was so evident to see you love fighting. Is there a part of you that doesn't love fighting because you know what your ability is to really damage another human being?
Yeah, I mean, I've always walked away. I wasn't the bouncer looking to punch. I never hit anybody in the face in over 20 years of bouncing, off and on. I mean, I went from the ghettoest clubs to the highest class nightclubs, LA, Detroit, Atlanta. I mean, I've been there and done that in the bouncing world. I never hit anybody. That tells you how good I am with my de-escalation skills and my wrist locks and spinning a guy around into a rear naked control V hold and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Or breaking the structure and taking them down, and people didn't even see what happened. I was never the guy looking for violence, and I always knew it could be used against me. It's not like you have to register your hands as a deadly weapon, but trust me when I say a DA is going to do.
Oh, they're going to eat you alive.
And see the 100 pages that come up on me.
Right.
The famous lawyer that sucker punched me, like his people pulled that kind of action, that I was obviously the violent type, and he didn't hit me first. No one would go against him, but that's a whole nother story. That's one thing I teach in my instruction on BJJ Fanatics, Combatives and Street Jiu-Jitsu. I teach a lot about use of force and legalities, basically, like common sense stuff. The other day, I just did a video. If you haven't seen it, I'd like you to watch it. Realistic shove defense. He shoved. I say, you're not going to defend the first time a guy shoves you. That's linear. The guy in a club, I mean, a guy put me on my ass once in a club, just did a shove.
Yeah. It's,
okay? Yes. But when they go for the second one, if you can read, it's not the overhand that usually is coming or a weapon grab. If you can read the second one, then there's 2 different ways you can arm drag and either go to the back or even, yes, realistically, Steven Seagal or Rini Nagi, the guy. So that was one of my recent videos, and people are bagging all, you could never do that. Are you telling me that you're on a grappling forum that I can never arm drag a guy when grapplers are usually defensive with a square posture and arms turtled in, versus when a guy is extending and walking forward fast to push you, giving you all his momentum, Kazushi, it gets a little easier than to spin him around like a top with an arm drag. So don't tell me an arm drag doesn't work on a jiu-jitsu forum. But I get those people. And it's like, I'm sorry you're a white belt and suck, but that doesn't mean I suck or I'm new to this. You know, I'm doing martial arts 36 years, MMA, jiu-jitsu since 97, and kind of dabbling, like faking it with judo and stuff.
Your air quotes. So, what's your favorite art out there? If you had to come down to one that was traditional, what's the one that you're like the most passionate about?
I don't know. I got it. I love karate in my mind because I started martial arts because of the Karate Kid. I love like the vignettes I see, and I've met Lyoto's dad, and I trained with his brother Chinzo and stuff. When I see them together, like it gives me this special feeling inside. I dream good about like real Shotokan or real Kyokushin. But even in Japan, I go visit a Kyokushin school I watch, and like everything they teach, I would teach absolutely differently. And that's probably because I have too much systema going direct and being loose versus like trying to make all this extra motion stuff. Um, I'm going to get a lot of hate, but it's probably systema. And as I age, it's probably more and more. And even when I hide it under the guise of street jujitsu or combatives, I'm certainly teaching a lot of things, knowledge gained of biomechanics.
Talk about that. I want to hear about that because there was the guy that I taught with. I think you know him, Lenny Sly.
Yeah,
He's
I know Lenny.
He is, you know, we had our falling out, but he is, in my opinion, one of the greatest martial arts teachers I've ever seen. And he's so brilliant when it comes down to Aikido, but he loves Systema as well too. How did your journey come into Systema? Because it was relatively unknown, pops out of nowhere. People were dogging on it. When I saw it, I saw chaos that lives in a fight. So it gave it validity for me. And then the relaxation, I went, oh, well, we live in that with Wing Chun. So I'm like, I never dogged on it because it looks, and then when yours video, when you're like the Systema punch, I'm like, oh, this is it. I could feel literally like my organs liquefying when you hit that guy in the chest.
It's hard to defend it, and I get in trouble, and then everyone blows me off. Dan, the Wolfman's not real. Really? My 4 black belts aren't real? My pro MMA experience? More than all that is sparring top pros over 20 years. Who else has sparred hundreds of pro fighters over 20 years, like hard sparring, hard grappling, and top jiu-jitsu guys? Like even the pros usually stop after 10 years because their body's beat up. But anyway, if I mention Systema, they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they go, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, actually, I do know what I'm talking about. And I started getting insights into it back in like 98, 99. And I've never been certified. I've only done one seminar. But I trained with him, who was a certified instructor under Vladimir. And but I've watched videos. Sometimes I get late at night and do the YouTube thing and start watching stuff on aliens and Systema, because aliens and Systema are probably the same thing. I mean, when the guys from Russia can do these really weird things, who knows? I just know that the Cold War Soviet were spending a lot of money in researching really weird shit, and guess what? We did too. You can look it up. It's all been declassified.
Well, if the Russians were, one thing that blows me away is if the Russians were phenomenal athleticism, don't you think that they would explore something as far as this goes? I'll back you up on this one. I have zero training in Systema. Never did. No, I didn't find out about it until probably about 5-6 years ago, right? And it does give credit. That was it for me is, well, Lenny knew it, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to give it credence. If here's a man who is taking it very seriously, and he's saying, no, this is legitimate. And then when I saw your video, I'm like, here's a professional fighter who's got traditional background, street fighting background, and MMA background, who's giving validity to this. That's good enough for me. So I don't know why people are so stupid to hear you've got this big
looks
padded.
Very bad on video.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Guys, and a lot of them suck, and a lot of the students suck. But you could say the same thing about a lot of martial arts.
Wing Chun, you can. Yes, you can.
I mean, but if I can find, I did a big seminar, and out of the 100, I would say 10 people, almost all older, I felt that they had some real stuff, and they probably had mixed backgrounds of Wing Chun and JKD and Kempo, one of the guys. Like, but there was like 10 people there that could really fight, and 90 that couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. Yeah. You can kind of say that towards any non-functional MMA martial art. Like in Muay Thai or MMA or wrestling or boxing, in a year and a half, you can get pretty good. Mm-hmm. It's a faster ROI, rate of return on rate of investment. Like in a year and a half, you can get like decent. But to someone like me, even a guy with 8 months of Muay Thai is nothing. You little white belt with your 9 months of jiu-jitsu telling me my stuff doesn't work, you're going to get a rude awakening if you roll with me. So it's weird because it looks bad. And it's different. And I don't even think it's necessarily good, and they probably don't like me for saying this, as a first martial art.
Yeah, go ahead and continue with this.
Unless you have someone like me that can break it down. And certainly even in my Krav class, yeah, some of the stuff I'm teaching is martial arts. I'm not labeling a system. I'm not labeling a Krav. It's just a principle that if I tilt his head back past 30 degrees, he loses all his strength. Well, that's a pretty important thing for people to know. And if they haven't trained their whole life, they don't know. So if I can bend his back this way, whether it's an Aribi Nagi or a Judo Osotogari, they're really the same thing. One's just with the arm, one's with the legs.
How is that? I want to hear about that too, because you just brought up a great point. So I took 5 years off of teaching because I got so tired of all the Wing Chun politics and bullshit. I said, screw this. And then I started watching the Cobra Kai series, and that made me go, all right, I want to start teaching again. When I came back, something that you just specifically identified was a problem is you can't have a student learn like we did, right? When I wrestled for years, which was easy to learn skill set because you're going at it like boxers do, boxing and wrestling from the get-go, right? So when you go to a Wing Chun class and your teacher says, stand there and do 1,000 air punches, you're like, I don't understand this. What's the benefit? And we're not from China or Japan doing the same motion a million times for self-perfection because we're Americans who want everything now. That being said, I teach differently to where, like, a really good friend of mine is in one of the best Wing Chun teachers in the world is in Florida. Justin Ock, great guy. He won't teach Chi Sao until year 5 because I'm like, not day 1 because people need to feel that physical attribute. Yeah. Coming from a traditional background and seeing the progression of MMA and the progression of the instant gratification students, has that changed the way you teach to progress validity in any art you do?
I'm just very open, and I like to explain. And I see blank faces on some students and others eureka right away. I can make people really good in a short amount of time. I mean, already in 1 month of Krav, I got one brand new female student, a couple that are doing really good. I've got the people that have been there 1 year, one an assistant instructor. I have upped his level from like a kickboxing standpoint immensely. I've tripled his skill level within 1 month of giving him pointers. So like some people you can just get to, they get it. And if you can explain it the right way in a simplified way, sometimes I get a little too heady and out there. But I try to repeat things and get it in because it's that important that they need to learn. I did a hair pull defense video that will go live this Thursday. And so instead of learning static, I said, that's a problem. Everyone teaches this technique. Instead of a guy's really grabbing you and pulling you off and whether he's hitting you or whatever. And I try to teach the concept, well, you're off. So you got to hit them and get your structure back. Oh, well, now the principle makes sense. I got to hit him wherever the closest is. It might be a ridge hand to the nuts or a kick to the nuts or a tiger claw into his eyes in the face, whatever you can hit. But while you hit him, you get your structure back because otherwise you're not getting it back. In MMA, if we were allowed like the early days to pull hair, you know how boring it would be? Just one guy would get a good guy, pull him off balance, never let him get a structure and just elbow him and it'd be over.
Yeah, that's the teaching I want to know how you do because what you're talking, I always talk about that's recovery, right? We can stand there in Wing Chun and perfectly aligned. You could take a straight punch coming in and shift with a bong sao and strike. But the second your spine is off, everything goes out the window, right? So how do you and we have something called 5-step drill, which puts you purposely in a bad position to recover. I don't see, and that's the gap that's bridged that YouTube has created, that people don't see you training behind the scenes for the recovery of getting out of structure back into structure. So therefore, it sucks, it doesn't work, just do MMA instead. You're the perfect person to talk to about that mentality, about where you saw this.
It's the internet. Fuck the internet. Fuck FB. Fuck Twitter. It ruined society. You literally ruined all of humanity. Congratulations. I mean, I guess we're participating in that a bit now. I do the YouTube thing, but yes, the instant gratification society. So yeah, guess what? You're getting way less enrollment in Wing Chun and Aikido and probably karate. Like, I mean, he should be packed with instructors. I already, like, years ago, I sent an email to like the Machida. Like, hey, if you do an instructor program, I guess they're just doing it now. They're kind of like 5 years too late. They should have got that as soon as they opened their school in like Southern California. They should have been like been this Cobra Kai karate,
Right.
Ryu karate, Cheetah karate, bringing it back. They had like a small window of time where they could have done that. Now, like the karate schools, everyone's going to hurt because it's somewhere in between. I look at it like, and I debate with that Rocas Leo guy and, oh, you defend Aikido, and everyone thinks I'm an Aikido instructor. Not an Aikido instructor, but I can make some stuff work from it because I have an open mind and I actually have attributes developed through, grappling or anything else, live pressure testing through other stuff. That means I have this where I can go, well, there, that works, or this Arimi Nagi could actually work in this situation. I don't know. It's gonna hurt those styles. The traditional styles are gonna hurt because people don't have the patience to stay in horse stance for 1 hour. It's not gonna happen.
100%.
They're like, well, on a movie, yeah, when you see it, when you see it in a movie, it looks cool, but nobody's doing that kind of stuff now. So you have to learn to adapt and teach it in a way where in my realistic shove defense video, everyone's going crazy because I know the Aikido guys, it's like 2,000 views already because I say Arimi Nagi and the Aikido guys are jumping on. But I'm also doing an arm drag to back control to a rear naked choke. So like, can the jiu-jitsu guys argue with me? Oh, that won't work. One, I'm turning them even less so I can adapt it to either hitting him with the Arimi Nagi throw, or I break his structure by hitting the lower of his back and I put him in a rear naked. Like, but they think like, it's just, I'm getting off on a subject, but just, yeah, they throw things out because they can't get it right away.
Is there benefit to, because we know there's benefit to traditional guys going to, the live, dynamic, explosive, real life fighting that MMA does offer, but is there value to, you have somebody who says, okay, day one, I'm going to go in, learn MMA, do an MMA for 5-6 years, and then says, okay, I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to learn traditional Aikido for a solid year. Is there value in doing that?
Not much, other than when you're injured or sick, which is when I rejoin Aikido schools for a month, like I recently did. Mm-hmm. I'm coming back from knee surgery. I got to start moving again. I went and did one karate class. Couldn't shake my head enough as they treated me like I was a beginner and I knew like 1,000 times more than them. Even, no offense, but like, I know what works in a fight and how to block a punch a lot better than you do. And then I joined an Aikido school and tried to be humble and did that. So it's good when you're like older, injured, that kind of thing. For someone that already did it now, is going to judo or karate as a kid good? Yeah, because that foundation. Don't forget all the good people that fought under my gym, highest time grappling system, Kokor Shavici and Gene LaBelle. They all had these long judo backgrounds. He raised them since kid. You had Carl Parisian throwing Nick Diaz on his head. He was throwing everybody around. First it was Cairo. Everyone forgets about Manny Gambarian. And then Ronda Rousey. Ronda didn't plug him for some reason, but Ronda started training there at 14 years old with Manny all the time. Manny and Carl, especially Manny. Was training with her at Kokor Shavician's gym. So she had that judo background and then Olympics and all that. Can that be very beneficial? Yeah, because of the discipline and the stuff we talked about earlier. You get that as a kid. Is it useful as an adult? You don't see a lot of adults taking things very seriously in a karate class, or Wing Chun, or Aikido, or anything. I mean, there's quite a few adults in the Aikido class I went to, so there'd be like 10 people there. I mean, it was all adults, really, and a couple teenagers with their dad. But, they certainly weren't fighters. There was 2 like good black belts under him, maybe, but could they actually fight? Maybe, like, I don't know. They could probably defend themselves better than no training.
That mentality I want to talk about. That's well. Let's. This flew by. We're gonna have you back on again, but let's close out with that for a second. Because I know it's not a question. I know that had I done Wing Chun first, I would have ended up like everybody else out there who only had a skill set of being able to flash rapid hands in a training demo and then getting your ass kicked. I'm extremely thankful that I spent a decade plus wrestling and then found Wing Chun. That made everything different for me.
Let's talk about that then.
All right, go ahead.
Because wrestling is what made you and Amin be able to actually apply your Wing Chun.
Right.
Or Carlson Gracie also had a very good friend who taught Wing Chun. And I did a paper in college on 16 reasons Wing Chun and BJJ are both effective because they take the guy to a range.
So that was
comfortable fighting him.
That was my second teacher, Phil Nearing. So Phil Nearing and Sam Kwok did the Chicago seminar between Carlson Gracie and that was so where I was attached to that. I didn't go to that. I came in a couple of years after that. Phil's tall, 6'2". He changed his style of teaching Wing Chun, and I've done videos on this. He actually robbed his students because he was under Steve Lee Swift first, which is very explosive. And Justin Aka, Florida, comes from that lineage. When Phil found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it changed the way that he did taught Wing Chun, which was very defensive. It was distance, and his students hurt. When I started incorporating wrestling going in, that's where I was eating everybody up. But yes, they live in that space. I just wonder the mentality of fighters. People, I think when they go to a boxing or they go to wrestling or judo, you develop a better fighting mindset, which you can translate into other arts like Aikido, Sistema, JKD, Wing Chun, and you can make it work better. And you've got that experience.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm the best Aikido wrist locker in the world, and I'm a brown belt beginner in Aikido with Badu Kemi, according to my instructor. So, I'm not doing that anymore. Now I'm teaching at a craft school, actually. So, the world goes around and around. It's all martial arts. But yeah, even a guy in the BJJ Fanatics forum on Facebook today was like, "Oh, I do Wing Chun." I posted an elevator fight, a bloody elevator fight, and this dog kicker headbutted a new student of my friend in Vietnam, Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu coach, NYPD cop, got 4 black belts, trained with Seagal, all that kind of stuff. I did an interview with him, but his student, this guy kicked his girl's dogs, and now they end up in a bloody elevator fight. But this one guy's like, "Oh, I like BJJ and Wing Chun." And I try to respond nice at first, like, well, elevator's a good spot where the Wing Chun could be helpful if you corner and screw the guy, with chain punches and elbows. That's the perfect place for Wing Chun, as an elevator fight. And then a couple guys started like bagging on him, like, well, Wing Chun doesn't work. And I'm like, well, if it's trappy, happy BS, it doesn't work. Instead of the guys that teach you, I'm just clearing the path to hit with forward pressure.
Thank you.
If you don't have forward pressure, you don't have Wing Chun.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
you've shown some videos. I started to watch. I'm like, are all these guys really leaning back, pretending they can go chap, 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 chap.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Do they not hit a wall ever?
And especially if any of your hits connect and your guy moves back even a half of an inch, now you're out of range. Yeah, so you need forward pressure.
Yeah, that's when you see these people karate blocking. It's like, your face is way back here. Why do you need to block that?
Oh shit!
That's fake demo. It's like, huh? Why would you bother getting your arm kicked?
Close us out. Close us out with your.
That's when I block a head kick.
Close us out with your straight blast, because I keep talking about this because there's a lot of people who are saying, what is the straight blast? And I keep referencing it. The single greatest example of what the straight blast was done by you. You did a video up. You put 2 of them up. I'll tell everybody, and I actually used your video in my straight blast explanation for it. You did it. Define what a straight blast is to you and the application of it.
Okay, put me on the spot here. I do it differently, and I got in it with one guy that must be linked up with the CIA super secret agent progressive fighting system circle of death guys.
That's the Paul Vunak clue.
Let's go do some pool cue fights. Anyway, I do it a bit differently. Now, I trained only 3 months, but I was training with the Wing Chun guy leading up to that fight. I was also training with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt from Brazilian top team, Marcelo Grosso, who had moved to the U.S. before 6 months of the cold. He's like, I'm getting the fuck out of here, going back to Brazil. So that's where I was training with as I fought Yuki Kondo, the King of Pancrase. So that is what I would call a real straight blast. And now my Wing Chun punches are not my karate punches. My karate punches I'm using more and more as I get older with these 2 knuckles, and I hide it from underneath. I have a video called Wing Chun vertical punch versus karate vertical punch versus cross. My Wing Chun punches I do with the bottom 3 knuckles. I don't know if that's what you teach, but I do it from the center up. I'm going to try to angle this down a little bit, but I do it from my center line up. And now I do it like a machine gun, where this is the bullet that comes into the chamber of the pistol, shoots, this drops, the other one comes up from the magazine, fires, 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 fires.
Yep, correct.
Now, Vunak's guys do running high, which gives your center right into a double leg takedown.
100%.
Anything
I've said
for
that.
bong sao underneath, I don't like this running up high stuff. I absolutely think he's teaching it the wrong way.
We agree. We agree. And that's
So
why when I saw
I
your
run
stuff, I agree
forward
with it.
and blast the guy. Now, I started that fight against Kondo that way. I think he was just starting to throw a round kick, and one of the Japanese magazines has a picture. I think it's the third one that actually hit him in the face as I kind of blasted through his kick range, and I surprised him. Now, there was no elbows allowed, so unfortunately, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then elbow maybe. Probably I started with my right hand because I was southpaw. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there was no elbows allowed. So then I did a left hook that I crashed too far in and it hit him like way back here. Had elbows been allowed, it would have looked a lot cooler, and I would have gotten more props. But he did talk about it a year later, saying it shocked him because he had just beaten wonderful jiu-jitsu guy I trained with later on. I trained with for a year, Saulo Ribeiro. I trained with Saulo and Zanji in 2000. Yeah, I trained with them later after this, but he had just beaten Saulo through the ropes bloody. And so he basically said, I just beat this guy. Everyone thought I would beat him in seconds. And now he's in my face with punches, hitting me with punches. I was surprised and shocked and worried that I was going to lose to like a no-name guy is basically what he said, translated. So even psychologically, it showed you that can be a good kind of fight starter. He's like self-defense video. Yeah. What he's showing is a guy in your face, and then if you blast over a guy, you're blasting over a guy. It's like 100 sucker punches.
Yeah, you pulled it off perfectly. The two examples you have up online, I went, that's it. You didn't have that raised up center of gravity that exposes. The easiest thing to ever wind up defeating a straight blast is to step off line. That's all it is. And even Wing Chun guys know that. Vunak, unfortunately, his center of gravity, as is a lot of the Eamon Bostepi guys under Lung Ting, it's center of gravity raised up. You used it as a shock and awe, kind of like, like when you walk into a big spider web and you do this stuff, that's what the opponent's reaction is. You did it and had them go, oh shit. You created the perfect entry, which a lot of people are like, well, Wing Chun has no entry. Well, if you're telegraphing, it doesn't. But if you do what a chain punch or a straight blast theory is, which you proved is brilliant, it works all the time.
Especially if you blast them into a corner and these become rolling elbow styles on a guy's face.
You did.
So it's much more
good.
effective if those first few were to crash the distance.
Well, that's 1, what 2, it is. 3, 4, the first few, 5, 6, they're not going to have power. They're not going to have power, and because you can't, in my opinion. No, you really can't knock somebody out with a straight blast in Wing Chun, but you certainly take them off balance to go to a takedown or winding up bust. Like Popeye Chun, which is a big Gary Lamb thing. He does the pushing people into a mattress. It's not supposed to be that. The concept is you push them into a wall. You push them out a window. You push them into a corner of the wall, and then you go in and just fucking wreck them. This is brilliant. This is excellent. Tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can support you. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me tell you my 2 funny Wing Chun stories before we go.
Go ahead.
2 funny Wing Chun stories I have is the first time I went to California to join Team Punishment, had nowhere to live, stood up. Where do I go? They said a youth hostel. I said, is this area or this area? I ended up at a youth hostel in Hermosa Beach. And so I was there for 11 days. And one of the days we're there, and now we're in the little room and we're all drinking vodka. And there's this Russian or Ukrainian guy. And he goes, I hear you do martial arts. I go, yeah, I do martial arts. What do you do? He goes, I do Wing Chun. And I would do like this, like as a kind of a joke, I guess. And he took offense. He starts chain punching me, blasts me all the way back to the wall. I hit the wall, and instinctively I like bongs out into a double leg, and I pick him off the ground, and he has like a guillotine on me. And I got his leg sideways, and I go, are we done? Are we just playing? He goes, yeah, we're just playing.
Holy shit. Right now, if a couple of my students are watching, that's the exact same reaction I had to a JKD guy who pressed me, and I jammed him into a wall to do the same thing. Are we done? It's like that same guy. Are we done? Oh, my God, it's awesome.
And then the same thing happened, basically the exact same thing happened when I was on I worked as an actor and stuntman, but also as a background actor. And I got on set to try and like hobnob, talk to the stunt coordinator, that kind of thing, of Crank 2. Very first day of shooting, Jason Statham. I'm there super early. I'm walking up. He happened to just walk out of his room, and he sees I got a UFC shirt on, comes up, talks to me about Boss Rutan and all this, and he doesn't like Bruce Peppy, but anyway, on set there's this stunt woman who's kind of famous now. She's been in everything, and same thing. She goes, "Oh, I know Wing Chun." And I go, "Huh," and she starts blasting at me, and literally I'm like pak sawing, bong sawing, and we're like play fighting, and the stunt coordinator runs around the car we're bought. He goes, "What are you doing? Stop that shit!" Because we're
God.
like literally like, I'm sure he would have got a kick out of it. I think he just missed it. It's too bad. I wish that Statham would have walked around the corner and seen, like, she was legit. She like teaches women self-defense. She was like a bodybuilder. If you saw pictures of it, you'd probably know who I'm talking about. And like she was like legit, and like we're like almost fighting, blasting on each other and trapping, and like and I wish that Statham would have saw it, and he comes on set and then they do a fight scene. He takes control. "Oh, I don't like that. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that." First day he was like, "I'm the guy in control,"
Okay.
which I kind of respect, because he's like a legit martial artist.
Yeah, I like his stuff. I like his movies. Tell everybody where they could follow you, support you, watch your stuff, and all that.
Website danthewolfman.com or thecombatsystem.com. You can find links to the BJJ Fanatics, Combatives, and Street Jiu-Jitsu. It's 4.5 hours. It's not one of these 1 hour multiple replay things. Like 4.5 hours, I teach everything that I think is really helpful, including preemptive striking and stuff. Cycling of strikes, not necessarily a straight blast, but hopefully guys will do that. They'll subscribe to my YouTube page. Look at my playlist. When I was younger, I did everything.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you flat out, if you're my audience watching, Dan's the real deal.
Thank you.
Oh, dude, I will give you accolades until the cows come home. I love your stuff. You've applied it. You put your money where your mouth is. You do so much, and you have a great balance between whatever MMA, traditional, real life. You have a ton of respect coming from me. So hey, thanks for joining today. Appreciate that, Dan the Wolfman.
You know, let's get together, do seminars. I mean, I wish that me, you, and Lenny could, kind of all make up. I haven't really talked to him in a while. He kind of vanished. I wish that, like, I have my friend Remy in Norway. Let's do some functional Wing Chun, functional Aikido type stuff. Like, hey, this is how you actually make this shit work.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm open to it. Dan, thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thank you, guys.